Have you ever felt like being visible is the price you have to pay just to be taken seriously? That if you're not posting it, proving it, or promoting it, then you might as well not exist. We've built a culture where the spotlight isn't just desired, it's demanded. And every time we step into it, a piece of us gets left behind. Not our best, but our advantage. Because here's the truth that nobody wants to say out loud. The more you show, the more they know. And the more they know, the easier you are to break. We live in an era that rewards exposure. Tell the world what you're working on. Show your process. Be authentic. Be transparent. Market your journey. But Machiavelli would have seen this for what it is: strategic suicide. In Renaissance, Florence's power was earned in silence and destroyed by noise. The rulers who lasted weren't the ones who made declarations. They were the ones who concealed, calculated, and struck only when it served their purpose. They knew that to be seen too clearly too early was to be destroyed eventually. That's not paranoia. That's pattern recognition. Today we've flipped that logic. We call overexposure branding. We announce our goals, post our failures, live stream our successes. We let the world in thinking it makes us real. But Machiavelli would have called it something else, giving away the playbook. And here's why that's fatal. The moment you announce what you're doing, you give people a target. Competitors adjust. Enemies prepare. Opportunists take notes. Even allies start reshaping how they see you, not based on what you've achieved, but on what you've revealed. Your words become your chains. That's the danger of the modern age. We confuse noise with strength, presence with performance. But let's be honest, how many people who talk big actually follow through? How many loud voices lead to silent failures? Visibility is addictive. It gives us a dopamine hit, a moment of attention, a brief sense of control. But it's a trap. Because once you crave it, you adjust your behavior to keep it. You start performing instead of planning. You trade results for reactions. And slowly, almost without realizing it, you stop being effective and start becoming explainable. That's when the real danger sets in. Because now you've become a product easy to study, easy to predict, easy to undermine. The man who explains himself constantly loses leverage. The man who reacts publicly loses mystery. And the man who shows his moves before they're finished loses everything. The irony. We think transparency builds trust. But Machiavelli would argue that strategic restraint builds fear, and fear lasts longer. Let's flip the scenario. Imagine two warriors. One enters the arena announcing how he'll win, boasting his skills, hyping his plan. The other walks in silently, eyes locked, no expression, no talk. Who do you fear more? Confidence doesn't need to explain itself. True power never introduces itself. It arrives. It moves. It's felt, not flaunted. Machiavelli knew that if people can't read you, they can't resist you. They don't know what you're willing to do. They don't know how far you'll go. They don't know if you're bluffing or about to strike. That uncertainty, that hesitation, is your weapon. But the moment you speak too much, share too much, prove too much, you hand over your weapon for applause, and applause fades. There's a reason Machiavelli warned everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. It wasn't just a commentary on deception, it was a tactical insight. Because once people think they know you, they stop fearing you. And once you're predictable, you're manageable. And once you're manageable, you're replaceable. This is the hidden cost of overexposure. You make yourself easy to read, easy to calculate, and easy to defeat. Let's be honest, in our world, everything is performative. People don't just live. They perform being alive. They don't just work. They document the hustle. They don't just succeed. They narrate the success in real time. And in that process, they leak. They leak desire. They leak insecurity. They leak strategy. Every caption, every tweet, every video is a breadcrumb, not just for fans, but for threats. And when you give the world enough breadcrumbs, eventually, they find your core. Machiavelli would see this and shake his head. Not because ambition is wrong, but because ambition without strategy is suicide. And strategy without secrecy is just theater. Let's take a real-world example. Look at the entrepreneur who announces every new product before it's built. The creator who shows every draft before it's finished. The leader who can't help but reveal plans to seem inspirational. On the surface, it feels like confidence, but underneath, it's exposure. And exposure invites theft, comparison, competition. Machiavelli would say, you don't win by announcing your weapons. You win by letting them feel it too late to respond. It's the fox that survives, not by bragging, but by vanishing until the move is already made. This isn't about being a coward. It's about control. Control over what others know. Control over how you're perceived. Control over when and if you're understood. Because when you are always broadcasting, others stop imagining you. And imagination is where fear is born. We don't fear what we fully grasp. We fear what we don't expect. The mysterious man in the room doesn't have to say a word. His silence invites projection. People begin to wonder, what's he thinking? What's he planning? And that wondering becomes psychological pressure. Now flip it, the man who shares everything. His mind is an open book. He's applauded for a while, maybe even admired, but never feared. And that's what modern culture gets wrong. We mistake exposure for empowerment. But the more you reveal, the less others respect the result because they've seen the mess. They've watched the sausage being made. And now that final product, no matter how impressive, feels familiar, expected, diminished. It's like a magician explaining his trick before the reveal. The magic dies the moment the mystery does. This is why the Machiavellian doesn't just execute, he edits perception. He understands that sometimes the strongest move is to withhold, to say less, to disappear during the process and emerge only when the outcome is irreversible. Let others show the chaos. Let them leak the drafts. Let them chase applause mid-sprint. You show up at the finish line. Quiet, composed, done. There's a term in warfare: operational security. The idea is simple. If the enemy doesn't know your plan, they can't stop it. But today, we violate that rule every day. We tell the world what we're building. We share our dreams with strangers. We record our progress for public consumption. And all the while, we assume that attention equals momentum. It doesn't. It's friction disguised as fuel. Because the more people watch, the more pressure you feel to perform. And performance, by definition, means you're adjusting to perception, not operating from purpose. You start thinking, how will this look, instead of, is this right? And that's how power slips, not with failure, but with distraction. Machiavelli didn't fear failure. He feared distraction. And distraction often wears the costume of validation. In our culture, there's a hidden pressure to be known, not just by your circle, but by everyone. To be understood. To be transparent. To be relatable. But Machiavelli would ask, why? Why give the world a clear view of your blueprint? Because once they understand your logic, they'll begin building counter-strategies. Once they predict your behavior, they'll limit your options. And once you hand them your internal map, they'll use it to box you in. This is why the most dangerous man in any room is the one you can't read. He's not hiding out of fear. He's withholding out of strength. He's choosing what you get to see and what you don't. That kind of restraint takes discipline. Discipline to stay quiet when you're excited. Discipline to hold back when you want credit. Discipline to execute in silence, knowing the results will speak when the time is right. Machiavelli didn't view silence as absence. He viewed it as a strategic posture, like a coiled spring. It's pressure building. It's control maintained. It's dominance. Delayed, There's a pattern you'll notice across history. The higher someone rises in power, the less often they speak. And when they do, their words land with force. Not because they're louder, but because they're rare. That rarity creates gravity. Every unnecessary word devalues your position. Every explanation you give makes you more accessible. Every declaration invites contradiction. The Machiavellian mind doesn't crave validation. It craves leverage. And nothing creates leverage like silence. Not a weak silence, a chosen one. A silence that holds. A silence that listens. A silence that watches others expose themselves while revealing nothing in return. Because people do expose themselves. When you give them enough space, they rush to fill it. They talk, they overshare. They try to decode you, project onto you, guess at your intentions. And in that guessing, they reveal their own insecurities, their own hopes, their own limits. You don't need to strike them. You just need to watch them unravel, all because you gave them silence instead of reaction. That's the game Machiavelli played and taught. Not domination through force, but control through perception. Make them underestimate you. Make them talk more than they should. Make them feel confident enough to move too early. Then move. It's the same in negotiations. The first to speak concedes power. The one who can sit in silence the longest learns the most. And while others explain and justify, the Machiavellian listens, watches, weighs, and when he speaks, it's decisive, unapologetic, and final. This is why the true strategist doesn't show his process. He shows the result, and only when it's too late for anyone else to catch up. That's not deception, it's precision. And precision is power. Look at modern leadership. The leaders who post daily narrating their every move, they attract attention, sure. But they lose respect. Now look at the quiet ones. The ones who rarely speak, but shift entire organizations when they do. Their silence gives their words weight. Their restraint builds mystique. And mystique, that's the real currency of power. Because once people know exactly how you think, how you react, what drives you, you become known. And once you're known, you're ordinary. Mystery forces people to take you seriously. Not because they understand you, but because they don't. And fear, as Machiavelli noted, is often rooted not in brutality, but in ambiguity. We don't fear the loudest man. We fear the one we can't predict. That's the paradox of power in the modern world. The more we share, the less we're respected. Because exposure feels intimate, but it often signals insecurity. We admire the calm, composed figure not because they tell us everything, but because they don't. Because we can't explain them, and that uncertainty creates caution, respect, even fear. And fear, when controlled, is far more durable than love. Because love is given, fear is crafted. Visibility is intoxicating. You get praise, you get recognition, you get validation fast, loud, and public. But Machiavelli would ask, what are you trading for it? Because make no mistake, visibility is never free. The moment you're seen, you're measured. The moment you're measured, you're judged. And once the world believes it has figured you out, it begins to resist you. Every display of power creates a debt. Now you're expected to perform. Now you owe the audience something. You've become a spectacle, not a strategist. That's the hidden cost no one talks about. You become trapped in the version of yourself that people like. And when you try to evolve, to shift, you're punished for changing. Machiavelli saw this centuries ago. He wrote, "The promise given was a necessity of the past. The word broken is a necessity of the present." In other words, your past self becomes a cage. And when the world feels entitled to your consistency, evolution looks like betrayal. But silence gives you space to change. When you don't owe the crowd a narrative, you're free to rewrite your own. You can adapt, pivot, abandon plans without anyone using your old words against you. You can move when the time is right, not when the audience is watching. Because the truth is, performance changes people. It makes them act for applause, not results. It makes them build for reaction, not resilience. It makes them addicted to optics, how things look, not how they work. And slowly, they start optimizing for visibility instead of viability. This is how empires collapse, not from external enemies, but from internal weakness disguised as confidence. A ruler who needs to be admired will always compromise his edge to protect his image. A strategist who needs to be understood will always reveal too much. The most effective power is felt, not explained. Think of gravity. It doesn't announce itself, it doesn't boast, but it moves everything. Machiavelli would argue, be like that. Let people feel your presence, not your performance. Let your absence raise more questions than your arrival. Let your work speak in echoes, not in noise. This is what most modern men miss. They think control comes from charisma. They think respect comes from being relatable. They think leadership comes from transparency. But the opposite is true. The more transparent you are, the easier you are to manage. The more explainable you are, the easier you are to challenge. The more common your process becomes, the less rare your results feel. The Machiavellian doesn't just win battles. He builds fortresses of the mind, places no one else can enter. His strategy is invisible. His thoughts are private. His next move is never announced, only felt when it's already too late to react. That's not secrecy for secrecy's sake. That's strategy in its purest form. You don't need to be mysterious to be powerful. But if people understand you too early, you've already given up your greatest advantage. Mystique magnifies impact, and every unnecessary reveal shrinks it. Let's end with a question Machiavelli might ask if he were alive today. If everyone is performing, what happens when you stop? What happens when you don't explain yourself? When you don't post the win, announce the plan, justify your silence? What happens when you simply move without warning, without permission, without applause? The answer is simple. You become unpredictable. And in the world of power, unpredictability is lethal. Because most people crave attention. And when you don't need it, you terrify them. They can't place you. They can't compare themselves to you. They can't prepare for you. That's what makes silence so effective, not as absence, but as leverage. A Machiavellian silence is not quiet out of fear. It's quiet out of control. It's the stillness before a storm, the restraint that builds tension, the pause that makes the room lean in. The loudest man, he draws fire. The quiet man, he draws curiosity. And curiosity is a far more powerful force because it creates pressure without force. It makes others show their hand while you reveal nothing. And that's the great mistake of the modern performer. He thinks being known is strength. He thinks sharing is leading. He thinks being seen makes him valuable. But Machiavelli knew. The man who is too visible becomes common. And the common man is never feared. He is judged, dissected, diminished. So what do the powerful do? They let others wonder. They let the world talk while they build in silence. They choose when and how to be seen. They never confuse being admired with being in control. Because control is not about attention. It's about timing. About knowing when silence serves you better than speech. That's why the most dangerous move isn't the one you announce. It's the one no one saw coming. The one you made while they were watching your shadow, not your hand. And that's how empires are built. Not with noise, but with decisions made far from the crowd. Not with declarations, but with positioning that speaks for itself. So here's the final truth. Power isn't in what people see. It's in what they can't see. It's not your speech that commands respect. It's the weight behind what you choose not to say. It's the sharpness you hide, not the edge you flash. It's the moves you make in silence, the ones that shift the room without needing a sound. Machiavelli didn't write for performers. He wrote for players, rulers, architects of influence, people who aren't seduced by the spotlight because they're too busy shaping the ground beneath it. So if you want to win in a world addicted to noise, don't outshout them. Outlast them. Don't show more, be more. Because when your silence is more powerful than their noise, you've already won.